The story of Alexander the Great begins in 356 BCE in the ancient kingdom of Macedonia, where a boy was born who would one day create the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen. The son of King Philip II and Queen Olympias, Alexander was destined for greatness from birth. His mother told him he was descended from Heracles and Achilles, instilling in him a sense of divine purpose that would drive his ambition throughout his short but extraordinary life. Alexander's education was equally impressive. At the age of 13, his father hired none other than Aristotle himself to be his personal tutor. For 3 years, the great philosopher taught the young prince literature, science, medicine, and philosophy. Aristotle gifted him a copy of Homer's Iliad, which Alexander kept under his pillow alongside a dagger, a perfect metaphor for a man who would combine intellectual brilliance with military might. But Alexander wasn't just a scholar. By age 16, he was already leading troops into battle. When his father left to fight a campaign, young Alexander was entrusted with governing Macedonia in his absence, a remarkable responsibility for a teenager. In 338 BCE, at the Battle of Chaeronea, the 18-year-old Alexander led the decisive cavalry charge that secured victory for his father against the Greek city-states. Demonstrating the tactical genius that would become his hallmark, Alexander's path to power accelerated dramatically in 336 BCE when his father was assassinated during a wedding feast. At just 20 years old, Alexander seized the throne, swiftly eliminating potential rivals and securing his position. The Greek city-states, sensing an opportunity with Philip's death, rebelled against Macedonian rule. Alexander's response was swift and brutal. He marched south, destroying the rebellious city of Thebes and selling its population into slavery, a stark warning to any who might challenge his authority. With Greece firmly under his control, Alexander turned his attention to the mighty Persian Empire, the superpower of the ancient world. In 334 BCE, with approximately 40,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry, he crossed the Hellespont into Asia Minor, beginning what would become an 11-year campaign of conquest. At the Granicus River, he faced his first major test against Persian forces. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander led a daring cavalry charge across the river, personally fighting in the thickest part of the battle. His recklessness nearly cost him his life when a Persian noble shattered his helmet with an axe, but his companion Clytus saved him by severing the Persian's arm. Alexander's military genius truly shone at the Battle of Issus in 333 BCE, where he faced a much larger Persian army led by King Darius III himself. Analyzing the terrain masterfully, Alexander identified weaknesses in the Persian deployment. He personally led his elite companion cavalry in a charge aimed directly at Darius. The Persian king, seeing his bodyguards fall around him, fled the battlefield, a humiliation that would haunt him. Alexander captured Darius's family, whom he treated with the respect due to royalty, surprising many with this display of magnanimity toward his enemies. Rather than pursuing Darius immediately, Alexander adopted a strategic approach, securing the Mediterranean coastline to deny the powerful Persian fleet any harbors. This campaign led to one of the most famous sieges in military history, the Siege of Tyre in 333 BCE. The island city had withstood sieges for centuries, believing itself impregnable. Alexander proved them wrong by constructing a causeway to the island, an engineering feat that still connects Tyre to the mainland today. After 7 months of brutal fighting, the city fell. Alexander's treatment of Tyre was merciless. Thousands were killed or sold into slavery, a stark contrast to his generous treatment of Darius's family. Moving southward, Alexander entered Egypt without resistance. The Egyptians, long suffering under Persian rule, welcomed him as a liberator. In a shrewd political move, Alexander made the arduous journey across the desert to the Oracle of Amun at Siwa. What exactly transpired there remains mysterious, but afterward, Alexander increasingly portrayed himself as divine. In 331 BCE, he founded Alexandria, the most famous of the many cities bearing his name, which would become a center of Hellenistic culture and learning for centuries. With the Mediterranean secured, Alexander finally turned inland to confront Darius again. At Gaugamela in 331 BCE, he faced a Persian army that possibly numbered over 100,000 men. On paper, it should have been an impossible battle to win. Yet Alexander's tactical genius prevailed again. Observing that Darius had cleared the battlefield of obstacles to benefit his scythed chariots, Alexander simply ordered his phalanxes to step aside when the chariots charged, rendering them useless. Then, identifying a gap in the Persian lines, he led his companion cavalry in a charge directly toward Darius. Once again, the Persian king fled, and his army collapsed. This decisive victory effectively ended the Persian Empire, though Alexander would spend another 2 years stamping out resistance. In 330 BCE, Alexander captured the Persian capital of Persepolis. After looting its treasures, he allowed his men to burn the magnificent palace complex, supposedly in revenge for the Persian burning of Athens during the Persian Wars a century and a half earlier. By this point, Alexander was increasingly adopting Persian customs and dress, causing tension with his Macedonian veterans, who saw the Persians as barbarians they had conquered, not equals to be emulated. With Persia defeated, many expected Alexander to return home. Instead, he pressed eastward into what is now Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, lands barely known to the Greeks. This phase of his conquests was perhaps the most brutal. The mountain tribes of Bactria and Sogdiana, in modern Afghanistan and Tajikistan, waged guerrilla warfare against the invaders, leading to savage reprisals. Alexander's forces captured supposedly impregnable mountain fortresses and crossed deserts and some of the world's highest mountain ranges. In 326 BCE, Alexander reached the Hydaspes River in India, where he faced King Porus and his army, which included war elephants, creatures most of Alexander's men had never seen before. The battle showcased Alexander's adaptability. Unable to cross the river directly due to Porus's defenses, Alexander divided his forces and crossed at night during a thunderstorm, outflanking the Indian army. Despite initial panic caused by the elephants, Alexander's disciplined troops prevailed. When the defeated Porus was brought before Alexander and asked how he wished to be treated, he replied, "Like a king." Impressed by his dignity, Alexander reinstated Porus as a vassal ruler. Alexander wanted to push further into India, but at the Hydaspes River, modern Bes, his exhausted army finally refused to go on. After an infamous 3-day sulk in his tent, Alexander reluctantly turned back. The return journey through the Gedrosian Desert in modern Pakistan proved almost as deadly as any battle, with thousands dying from heat and thirst. By 323 BCE, Alexander had returned to Babylon, where he began planning new campaigns into Arabia. However, fate had other plans. After a prolonged drinking party, Alexander fell ill with a fever that grew steadily worse. On June 10, 323 BCE, Alexander the Great died at the age of 32. Having conquered an empire stretching from Greece to India, when asked on his deathbed who should inherit his empire, he reportedly answered, "To the strongest," ensuring the conflicts that would tear apart everything he had built. Alexander's achievements are staggering. In just over a decade, he marched his army more than 11,000 miles, founded over 70 cities, and created an empire of some 2 million square miles. He never lost a battle, despite often being outnumbered. His conquests spread Hellenistic culture throughout the known world, creating a common cultural framework that would influence civilizations for centuries to come. His dream of a fusion between East and West resulted in a cultural flowering known as the Hellenistic Age. Perhaps most remarkably, Alexander accomplished all this before his 33rd birthday. Had he lived longer, it's impossible to say what else he might have achieved. Would he have succeeded in conquering Arabia, Carthage, and Rome as he planned? Would his empire have stabilized, or would it have collapsed under its own weight regardless? In the end, Alexander's empire didn't outlast him for long. His generals, the Diadochi, or successors, fought over his legacy, eventually carving the empire into separate kingdoms. Yet his cultural impact endured far longer than his political achievements. The Hellenistic kingdoms continued to spread Greek culture, language, and ideas throughout the Mediterranean and deep into Asia. Alexander's legacy is complex. He was a military genius who brought Hellenic civilization to the east, yet his conquests caused immense suffering. He was a student of Aristotle who respected knowledge and culture, yet capable of razing ancient cities to the ground. He dreamed of a brotherhood of man, yet he could be ruthlessly pragmatic in pursuit of power. Perhaps this complexity is why Alexander continues to fascinate us more than 2,300 years after his death. In his short life, he redrew the map of the world and changed the course of history. Whether we see him as a visionary, a military genius, or a ruthless conqueror, one thing is certain. Few individuals have ever left such an indelible mark on human history as Alexander the Great, the Macedonian king who conquered the world before his 33rd birthday.